When a millionaire CEO secretly followed an old cleaning lady after work, what he discovered didn't just change his life, it changed the fate of an entire community. Ask ChatGPT. John Ellison was the kind of man people admired and feared at the same time. He was tall, confident, always dressed in sharp suits, and had built his tech company from scratch. People in the office whispered his name like he was someone from a different world, a world of power, money, and success. At just 45, John had everything: mansion on the coast, expensive cars, his name on magazines, and an army of employees who followed every instruction he gave. He had worked day and night to reach the top, and now he was there. But there was something missing, though John didn't realize it yet. He lived in a world of numbers, deals, and deadlines. His day started early and ended late. He spoke to investors, board members, lawyers, and engineers. But he didn't know the names of most of the people who worked for him, especially the ones who cleaned his office after hours, or refilled the coffee machine, or swept the floors. To him, they were invisible. One night, after a long meeting with the product team, John stayed behind in his glass-walled office on the top floor of the building. Everyone else had left. It was quiet except for the sound of the air conditioner humming. As he leaned back in his chair and stared out at the city lights, he noticed someone moving just outside his office. It was an elderly woman wearing a gray uniform, holding a mop and a small bucket. She moved slowly, carefully, wiping the floors with steady hands. John had seen her before, maybe once or twice, but had never really paid attention. Tonight, something made him pause. Maybe it was the way she worked without rushing, with focus, even though no one was watching her. Maybe it was the way she pushed her tired body forward, as if the mop was heavier than it looked. He watched her for a while. She didn't notice him. She was humming a tune, something soft and familiar, while she wiped the floors clean. The next day, John asked his assistant, "Who's the old woman who cleans this floor at night?" His assistant blinked in surprise. "You mean Rosa? Is that her name?" "Yes, Rosa Alvarez. She's been with us for about 4 years, I think. Works the night shift." John nodded but said nothing. For years, and he had never once spoken to her. That made him feel a little uncomfortable. Over the next few days, John found himself noticing Rosa more often. Would arrive in the early evening, always wearing the same gray uniform, carrying a small cloth bag. She greeted the security guards with a warm smile. She never looked tired or upset. In fact, she always looked calm. It's like someone who had made peace with the world. He watched how she greeted the younger cleaning staff, how she helped them without being asked, how she took time to clean even the corners of rooms that no one ever used. He noticed how some of the younger workers called her abuela, which meant grandmother in Spanish. She didn't mind. She laughed with them, gave them advice, and sometimes brought snacks to share. John started to feel curious about her. Who was she? Why was someone her age still working so hard? She looked like she should have been retired. Her hair was silver, her hands were thin and full of small scars, and she walked with a little limp, like her knees hurt. And yet she worked like someone with a mission. He asked the HR department for her file. It was short. She had no listed family members. Her address was in a poor neighborhood in Brooklyn. No email, no emergency contact, no medical history. It was like she didn't exist beyond the cleaning job. This mystery began to grow in John's mind. He was used to solving problems, reading between the lines, understanding patterns in business. But Rosa didn't fit into any pattern he knew. She didn't have ambition, it seemed. She didn't want attention. She wasn't saving up for something big. She just showed up every day and worked. One evening, as he stepped into the elevator to leave, he saw her again. She was dusting a lamp near the lobby. He hesitated, then walked over. "Rosa, right?" "Right." She looked up, surprised. "Yes, sir." "I'm John," he said, though of course she knew who he was. "Yes, Mr. Ellison. I see you sometimes. You've been working here a long time." "For years and 3 months," she said with a gentle smile. "Why do you work so late? Shouldn't you be home resting?" She laughed, not in a rude way, but like someone who had heard that question before. "Rest comes later," she said. "Work is good for the soul." John smiled politely and nodded. But something about her words stuck with him. Work is good for the soul. He repeated that line in his head all the way home. That night, he couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about Rosa. The way she moved, the way she worked without complaining, the kindness in her voice. He realized he knew more about his rival CEOs than he did about the people who cleaned his building. That realization made him feel small and guilty. The next night, he stayed late again, this time on purpose. He pretended to read reports, but really, he was waiting for Rosa. When she arrived, she didn't see him at first. She went about her tasks, cleaning windows, changing trash bags. At one point, she stopped and rubbed her back gently, clearly in pain, but continued working. John watched from behind the glass wall, his heart heavy. Then he did something he never thought he'd do. When Rosa clocked out at 10:15 p.m. and walked out of the building, John followed her. He kept a safe distance. He didn't want to scare her, just wanted to see where she went after work. Was she living alone? Did she take a cab or a bus? What kind of life did she have outside the walls of his glass tower? She walked 2 blocks to a bus stop. It was cold, and she wrapped her thin coat tightly around herself. She waited alone. John stayed in his car nearby, engine running. When the bus came, she got on. He followed. The ride was long, over 45 minutes, through quiet streets and old neighborhoods. She got off in a rundown part of Brooklyn, near buildings with broken windows and graffiti-covered walls. John parked his car a few blocks away and followed her on foot. She walked slowly, carefully, holding her bag close to her side. After 3 blocks, she turned a corner and entered a building, not an apartment, but something that looked like an old church. The sign outside said Hope Haven Youth Shelter. John stopped walking. A shelter? Why would Rosa go there? He waited outside for over an hour. People came and went, teenagers, volunteers, tired-looking staff. But Rosa didn't come out. Finally, at midnight, she stepped out with 2 young boys beside her. They were smiling. One gave her a hug. She laughed and handed them each a small paper bag. Then she waved goodbye and walked home to a tiny building nearby. An old, run-down apartment complex. John stood there in the cold, shocked. Rosa had worked a full shift at his company and then spent hours at a shelter helping kids. He didn't understand it. She was old, tired, and clearly not rich. So why did she give so much of herself to others? He drove home that night with no music, no phone calls, no thoughts of business. Just the image of Rosa hugging those kids and smiling under a broken streetlight. Over the next few days, John couldn't focus. Spreadsheets and presentations looked meaningless. His thoughts kept drifting back to Rosa. He needed to know more. He needed to understand who she really was and why she lived the way she did. He didn't know it yet, but this quiet old cleaning lady was about to change his life forever. John Ellison had never followed anyone before. He was a CEO, a man of logic, rules, and discipline. But after that night, when he saw Rosa walk into the youth shelter, something inside him shifted. He couldn't stop thinking about her. He had always believed that money and success were the most important things in life. That was what had driven him since he was a teenager. But Rosa seemed to live by a different set of rules he didn't understand. The next morning, arrived at his office earlier than usual. The city was still waking up, sat at his large desk in silence, replaying what he had seen. The night before, Rosa, with her tired back and gentle smile, giving away food to children after working a hard late shift. It didn't make sense. She wasn't rich, famous, or powerful. And yet, there was something about her that felt more real than anyone he'd met in the business world. He called his assistant, asked for a list of the cleaning staff schedules for the entire building. He wanted to see exactly when Rosa started and ended her shifts. Then he searched for information about Hope Haven Youth Shelter. It was a small organization, not well known, and barely funded. The website looked old and basic. There was a short description of their work: helping homeless teens, offering food, counseling, and temporary shelter. It didn't mention Rosa's name anywhere. Over the next week, John continued to observe her. He didn't talk to her again, just watched. Rosa's routine never changed. She came in every evening, greeted everyone with a warm smile, worked, steadily through her shift, and then left around 10:15 p.m. She always carried the same small cloth bag, wore the same uniform, and looked just as calm and focused each time. John followed her again and again, always from a distance, never too close. He didn't want her to know. He didn't know what he was hoping to discover, only that there was something more to Rosa than just her job. He watched her walk through cold streets, board the same bus, ride in silence, and get off in the same neighborhood. And every night, she went into the shelter and stayed for at least an hour, sometimes more. One evening, he parked nearby and waited until Rosa came out. This time, she was carrying a box. Behind her were two teenage girls who looked about 16. They were laughing, and Rosa was laughing with them. She handed them the box and waved goodbye. The girls walked away, hugging it tightly, like it was a treasure chest. John was curious. He walked closer to the shelter and peeked through the window. Inside, a few more teenagers were sitting at tables, eating and talking. One of them was crying softly while a volunteer sat beside her. The place wasn't big or fancy, but it felt alive with kindness, struggle, and hope. John leaned against his car and stared at the sky. He had built a billion-dollar company. He had flown in private jets, closed deals in Europe and Asia, and been honored with awards. But he couldn't remember the last time he had done something that truly touched another human heart. His thoughts were interrupted when he heard a voice beside him. "You again?" It was Rosa. John turned, startled. "Oh, hi. I didn't mean to... I mean." She smiled, not angry, just curious. "You've been following me." He hesitated, embarrassed. "Yes, I have." "Why?" John sighed. "Because I wanted to know who you really are." She raised an eyebrow. "I'm Rosa. I clean your office. We're more than that. Work all night and then come here. You help kids, cook for them, talk to them. Why do you do it?" Rosa looked at him quietly for a few seconds. "Because someone once did it for me." They stood there on the sidewalk under a broken streetlight. Cars passed slowly. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. John waited. "I came to this country when I was very young," she said slowly. "I didn't have anything. No family, no job, no English. I lived on the street for a while. It was hard, cold, lonely. Then one day a woman found me. She ran. A small shelter, kind of like this one. She gave me food, a bed, and taught me how to clean. She gave me dignity." John listened closely. "What happened to her?" "She died many years ago. But I promised myself that if I ever got a chance, I would do for others what she did for me. You could have stopped working. You could have retired." Rosa chuckled. "And do what? Watch TV? I'm not rich, Mr. Ellison. But I'm alive. As long as I have breath, I'll use it to help someone." John felt something tighten in his chest. He looked down. "I feel foolish. I've been so focused on business, profits, numbers." And no one even notices. "It's not about being noticed," Rosa said gently. "It's about knowing you've made someone else's day a little easier." John nodded slowly. "Do you ever need help?" Rosa smiled again. "We always need help. But not just money. Need time, ears to listen, shoulders to cry on. That's harder to give." That night, John went home and sat in his quiet living room for hours. His walls were filled with paintings and awards, but they felt empty. He realized something that shook him. Rosa, with her tired body and small paychecks, had more purpose in her life than he did. The next day at work, John was distracted. He watched the staff walking in and out, so many people he had never spoken to. He began to notice things. One woman in the break room looked pale and tired. Security guard looked like he hadn't slept in days. A junior developer seemed nervous. Every time a manager passed by, it was like a new world had opened in front of his eyes, one that had been there all along, hidden behind his own blind ambition. He opened his email and typed a message to the HR director. I want to review the employee support programs, not just for the high-level staff, for everyone. Especially the night shift, the cleaning crew, the cafeteria team. I want to know what we offer and what we're missing. The reply came within minutes. Of course, sir. I'll gather the details. But that wasn't enough. John needed to do more. That evening, he left work at the same time as Rosa. She saw him and laughed. Again, he said, walking beside her. They sat together on the bus. Rosa shared stories of some of the kids at the shelter. One boy had run away from an abusive home. Another girl had lived in a car with her mother for a year. Each story made John feel like his heart was shrinking and growing at the same time. At the shelter, John helped serve soup. No one recognized him, which felt strange but nice. He listened, smiled, and helped wash dishes afterward. That night, when he went home, he felt something different inside him. Not happiness exactly, but peace. The kind of peace that doesn't come from money, but from doing something that matters. Over the next few weeks, John kept going. He became a quiet volunteer. He didn't tell anyone at work, just showed up, rolled up his sleeves and did what needed to be done. He and Rosa became close. She told him about her childhood, her dreams, her fears. He listened like a student. She taught him not just how to clean floors, but how to see people. One night, they were packing food boxes. John asked, "What keeps you going, Rosa?" She looked at him. The faces, the small changes. When a kid who used to cry starts to laugh. When someone gets their first job. When they come back after years and say, "You helped me," that's worth everything. John nodded. "Felt that in business, you can," she said. "But you have to look beyond the spreadsheets." John laughed. "I'm learning." And he was. Slowly, quietly, he was changing. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in the way that truly matters. He had started this journey because of curiosity, but now he was on it because of something deeper. Something Rosa had shown him without even trying, that the smallest acts of kindness can carry the greatest power. He still wore suits, still went to board meetings, still made business decisions, but his eyes had changed. Now when he walked through the halls of his company, he noticed the janitor with the tired eyes, the receptionist who always smiled, the delivery guy who limped slightly but never complained. He began to greet them, talk to them, ask them how they were, and every time he saw Rosa at work, he smiled quietly, knowing that behind her gentle steps was the heart of someone who had taught a millionaire how to be human again. John Ellison had entered Rosa's world without fully understanding where it would lead him. What had started as a quiet curiosity had become something more meaningful than he had ever expected. Each evening he spent volunteering at the shelter, brought new emotions, new truths, and new realizations. But still, there was a part of Rosa's story that remained unclear to him. He wanted to know who she really was, not just what she did, but why she did it, what she had lived through, and what gave her such strength. Rosa never bragged. She never talked about her own pain unless someone asked. She had that quiet kind of dignity, the kind that made people want to listen when she did speak. One cold Tuesday evening, after helping a young boy clean a cut on his hand, Rosa sat next to John on the shelter's old wooden bench. It had become their usual place, near the kitchen, just beside the heater. She looked tired, more than usual. Her fingers trembled slightly, and John noticed how slow she was while tying her scarf. Gently asked Rosa, "Do you ever get tired of helping people? Doesn't it feel like too much sometimes?" She smiled faintly. "Sometimes, yes. But tiredness is not the same as losing heart. My body may be tired, but my heart is still strong." Silence. The heater hummed. The voices of teenagers laughing and arguing filled the air around them. Then John asked softly, "Will you tell me your story? I know bits and pieces, but I want to know how it all began. How you became you." Rosa looked at him for a long moment. You really want to know? John nodded slowly. I do. She took a deep breath and leaned back on the bench. I was born in a small village in El Salvador. My father died when I was 7. My mother worked as a seamstress, stitching clothes for pennies. We were poor, but we had love. My brothers used to chase chickens around the yard. I used to dream of becoming a teacher. Life was hard, but it was home. John listened closely. He had never imagined Rosa's life beginning in a place so far from the skyscrapers of New York. When I turned 16, she continued, things got worse. A group of men from the military came to our village. They said it was to protect us, but all they did was bring fear. One night, there was gunfire. I never saw my older brother again after that night. Her voice cracked slightly, but she kept going. My mother told me to run. She gave me her necklace and told me to go north. I didn't want to leave her, but she said, if you stay, you'll die. So I left. Crossed borders, walked through deserts, climbed on the back of trains. I was just a girl, alone. John's throat tightened. That sounds terrifying. She nodded. There were nights I thought I would never make it. Days without food. People who tried to hurt me. But there were also moments of kindness, strangers who gave me water, women who shared their bread. I learned that the world is full of both cruelty and kindness. The trick is to keep walking toward the kindness. When I finally reached the U.S., I was in Los Angeles. I didn't know English. I had no money, no place to stay. I slept behind. Restaurants. Sometimes I picked fruit in farms just to earn a few dollars. Then, one day, I fainted from hunger outside a church. A woman named Margaret found me. She was white, old, and very strict, but she had a soft heart. She ran a small shelter for homeless women and children. She gave me soup, let me sleep on the floor, and taught me how to clean. Margaret became like a second mother to me, Rosa said, her eyes distant. She didn't speak Spanish, and I barely understood English, but somehow we understood each other. She made me promise one thing. When you find your feet, help someone else find theirs too. I said yes, and I never forgot it. John felt tears prickling behind his eyes. He looked at Rosa, this small, fragile woman beside him, and realized. She had lived a life full of pain, yet carried herself like a queen. She had no riches, no comfort, but she had a mission. That mission made her stronger than anyone he knew. I worked as a cleaner, a cook, a babysitter, she continued. Anything honest, saved every penny. I sent money back home too. My mother, until the war ended, but when I finally went back years later, I found only her grave. She paused and swallowed hard. That broke me for a while. I felt like everything I had done had come too late. But then I remembered Margaret's words, so I came back here. I moved to New York, got another cleaning job, and started volunteering at the shelter. These children, they are pieces of my past. When I help them, I feel like I'm healing myself too. John couldn't speak. He had no words that could match what Rosa had just shared. He reached for her hand and squeezed it gently. You are incredible, he whispered. I'm just a woman who didn't give up, she replied. From that night on, their friendship grew stronger. John started coming to the shelter more regularly. He didn't just volunteer anymore. He became part of the team. He repaired broken windows, bought new blankets, and helped paint the walls. He also used his connections to bring in doctors, counselors, and teachers on a volunteer basis. But he kept all of this quiet. No news articles, no press releases. He didn't want the world to see what he was doing. He wanted to honor Rosa's way silent, steady, and selfless. He also made changes at work. He introduced a new policy. Every employee, regardless of role, would be given access to counseling, emergency financial support, and skill-building workshops. He invited the cleaning staff to meetings, asked their opinions, and gave them proper recognition. At first, people were confused. Some thought it was just a PR move, but over time, they began to see it was real. John wasn't just playing a role. He was different now, at company events. He started sharing short stories not of tech milestones or financial growth, but of the people who made everything possible. He spoke about the cafeteria workers, the mailroom guy who played guitar in his spare time, The woman who had worked quietly for 20 years without ever being late, but he never mentioned Rosa by name. That was their unspoken agreement. One evening after another long shift at the shelter, Rosa and John sat under a tree. In the small park across the street, the moon was bright and a soft breeze moved through the leaves. "Do you ever miss your old life?" Rosa asked. John thought for a while. "You mean before I met you?" She nodded. "I miss the simplicity of having one goal success. It was easy to measure profits, numbers, awards. But now everything is more complicated. I think more. I feel more. Sometimes it's overwhelming." Rosa smiled. "That means you're alive." They sat in silence for a while. Then Rosa said, "You've changed, John. I hope you know that. I feel it. I used to think I had it all, but now I understand what having it all really means. It's not about money or power. It's about meaning, about knowing that your life touches others in a good way. You're becoming like Margaret," Rosa said softly. "It's helping others find their feet." John looked up at the stars. "Maybe, but I'm just following your lead." "No," she said with a laugh. "You're walking beside me now?" The next day, John went to the shelter early. Rosa wasn't there yet. One of the staff members approached him and said, "Mr. Ellison, Rosa told us you're someone we can trust. She doesn't say that about many people." John smiled. "She's someone worth following." The shelter was now growing. Donations had started coming in, some quietly placed by John, others from people he had inspired. More kids were being helped. Some of them were even getting internships at his company. He had created a bridge between two worlds, his glass tower and the broken sidewalks. Rosa had walked for decades, but more than anything, John felt a change deep inside him. He no longer felt hollow when he returned to his mansion. His money had found purpose, his time had meaning, was now open and warm. All because of one old cleaning lady who had walked with quiet dignity and given without expecting anything in return. And John knew. A doubt that whatever came next, he would never go back to the man he used to be. After many weeks of working together, John and Rosa's bond grew stronger, and John's life began to change in ways he had never imagined. He was no longer just the powerful CEO who cared only about profits and the company's growth. Started to understand the real value of kindness, community, and the struggles of everyday people. One evening, after a long day at work, John sat quietly in his office, looking out over the city lights. The glow of the buildings below reminded him of the tall towers he had built with his company, but his mind was far from the usual business plans. Instead, he thought about Rosa, the shelter, and the many children who had nothing but hope and resilience. John knew he wanted to do more than just volunteer occasionally. He wanted to create something lasting, something that could help not just a handful of kids, but many more like them. The shelter was small, and while it did its best, it was always struggling. Resources were limited, and the staff worked tirelessly, but were constantly stretched thin. He thought, what if I could use my resources, my network, and my experience to build something bigger? A place that could provide food, shelter, education, and hope to hundreds, maybe thousands of children. He decided to share his idea with Rosa the next time he saw her. The two met, as usual, at the shelter after work. Rosa was sweeping the floor, her movements slow but steady. When John told her about his plan, she looked surprised but hopeful. "You want to help us build a bigger shelter?" she asked. "Yes," John replied. "It's not just a shelter, but a Centura community where children can learn, play, heal, and grow. I want it to be safe and welcoming, a place where no child feels alone or forgotten." Rosa smiled, her eyes shining. "That sounds like a dream. Then let's make it real." They began planning. John reached out to architects, city officials, and potential donors, used his influence to get permits faster and to find a location. Rosa helped by connecting John with the community families, volunteers, and other shelters. Together they dreamed big. As the project gained momentum, John noticed something changing inside himself. He was no longer just a businessman. He was a leader with a new purpose, one that connected his success to the well-being of others. Days turned into months. Construction began on a large building near the old shelters neighborhood. It would have classrooms, a medical clinic, a kitchen large enough to feed hundreds, and rooms for children to stay safely. John visited the site often, sometimes wearing his expensive suit, other times in work clothes. Helping paint walls or organize furniture, Rosa was there every day. Guiding volunteers, welcoming new kids, and sharing stories of hope and survival. She was the heart of the project. Her determination and kindness inspired everyone around her. One afternoon, John met with a group of donors and city leaders inside the new building. As he spoke about the vision, he saw Rosa quietly standing. In the corner, her hands folded, listening with quiet pride. She had never been one to seek attention. But John made sure everyone knew her story, the story of a young girl who survived war, homelessness, and hardship, only to become a beacon of hope for others. After the meeting, John walked with Rosa. Outside, where children were playing on the new playground, a little boy ran up to Rosa, hugging her tightly. She smiled and ruffled his hair. John watched and felt a warmth in his heart. He had never felt before, but the road was not without challenges. Some in the business world criticized John for focusing on charity instead of profits. Investors questioned whether his attention was divided. Some employees whispered that he was losing focus. John faced tough decisions. His company had to balance financial goals with his growing commitment to social responsibility. Sometimes it felt like a battle between two worlds, the cold, hard numbers of business and the messy, emotional needs of humanity. Yet John remained steadfast. He held meetings where he encouraged his executives to think beyond profits. He introduced new policies promoting employee volunteerism and corporate giving. Slowly, the company culture began to shift. People felt more connected, more proud of their work, knowing they were part of something bigger. One evening, as John and Rosa were closing up the new center, a young girl approached them. She was shy but smiled brightly. "Thank you for helping." "Me," she said softly. Rosa knelt down and hugged her. John watched and realized that this simple moment was the true success changing lives. One child at a time. He thought back to his own childhood, to his hunger for success, and how empty it had felt until now. He realized that true success was not about how much money he made or how many buildings he owned. It was about how many lives he touched, how many hearts he healed. John and Rosa worked tirelessly to expand the program, creating after-school classes, music lessons, therapy sessions, and job training for older kids. They invited doctors and teachers to volunteer, creating a network of support that was both professional and deeply caring. As the center flourished, stories began to emerge of children who had been saved from dangerous situations, who had gone on to college, who had found hope and purpose thanks to the programs they had built. John often thought about the day first saw Rosa walking home after work. That small moment had changed everything. It had shown him the power of kindness, the strength in humility, and the importance of seeing people as more than numbers or job titles. He had learned from Rosa that the most valuable things in life cannot be bought or sold. They are earned through compassion, courage, and connection. One evening, as they closed the center, John turned to Rosa and said, "You have taught me more than I ever thought possible." Rosa smiled. "We teach each other." "That's how it should be," John nodded. He knew his journey was far from over. There were still many children to help, many challenges to face. But now he was ready not just as a CEO, but as a man who understood the true meaning of leadership. Together, John and Rosa had created something more than a building or a program. They had created hope, a future, and a legacy, and that legacy would continue to grow one life at a time. If you want, I can continue with part 5 or help you in any other way. After the new community center was up and running, life changed not only for the children who came there, but also for John and Rosa. What started as a small act of kindness had grown into something huge, a place that gave hope, education, and a chance for a better life to those who needed it most. But even with success, the journey was far from over. The real work was only beginning. John had spent many years chasing success, climbing the ladder, and building a business empire. Now he found himself chasing something more meaningful, a dream to change lives, one person at a time. He had learned from Rosa that true happiness did not come from wealth or power, but from helping others. This was a lesson he never expected to learn so deeply. The community center was alive every day. In the mornings, children would gather for breakfast, many of them having come from homes where meals were scarce or skipped. The kitchen staff, some volunteers, and some paid with funds John raised, prepared fresh, healthy food. It was more than just a meal. It was a symbol of care and stability for the children. After breakfast, the classrooms filled with laughter and chatter. Children learned reading, writing, math, and art. Many of these kids had never been to school regularly before. Teachers were patient and kind, understanding that these children had faced hardships no child should face. They worked hard to create a safe space where learning was fun and where mistakes were just part of growing. John often visited the classrooms, watching the children and teachers interact. He would sometimes read stories aloud or help with projects, though he was a CEO used to making big decisions in this place. He found joy in small moments, a child's proud smile after finishing a drawing, the shy hands raised to answer a question, the quiet determination to learn despite difficulties. Rosa was always nearby. She had become a mother figure to many of the children, a symbol of strength and love. She remembered her own past, how she had once been a lost girl with no one to turn to on now. She was the reason others could find their way. Her heart was full when she saw children laughing, learning, and dreaming again. The center also offered counseling and medical care. Many children carried invisible wounds, fear, sadness, trauma. The counselors helped them speak about their feelings and gave tools to cope with pain. Doctors volunteered to provide checkups and treatments. For many families, the center was the only place they could turn to for help. John understood that. Fixing a child's future was not just about education or food, but about healing the whole person. So, the center included programs for parents to parenting classes, job training, and support groups. They wanted to help families become strong and self-sufficient. One day, a young woman named Maria came to the center with her little brother. Maria was 16 and had been living on the streets after running away from an abusive home. She was scared and quiet. Rosa took her under her wing, helping her find shelter and food, and encouraging her to join the center's education program. John met Maria during a visit and was moved by her courage. He offered her an internship at his company, a chance to learn skills and build a future. Maria accepted, nervous but hopeful. Over the months, she blossomed, gaining confidence, learning new things, and dreaming of a life she once thought impossible. Stories like Maria's became the heart of the center's work. Each child had a past filled with struggles, but the center was giving them a chance to rewrite their stories. Meanwhile, John's own life had transformed completely. He no longer measured success by the size of his bank account or the company's profits. Instead, he measured it by the smiles he saw, the lives he touched, and the hope he helped create. His employees noticed the change too. The company culture became warmer and more connected. Employees volunteered regularly, proud to work for a company that cared. The business grew, but with purpose and compassion. John showed that success and kindness could go hand in hand. One evening, John sat with Rosa at the center after everyone had left. The building was quiet, the lights dimmed. They talked about the future. "Do you think we've done enough?" John asked softly. Rosa smiled. "No, the work is never done. But we have done a lot. We have given children a chance to dream again." John nodded. "I used to think that money was the answer to everything. I know it's just a tool. What really matters is what we do with it." Rosa looked at him kindly. "Used it well. You followed your heart." John thought about the night he first followed Rosa home, curious about the woman who cleaned buildings silently while the city slept. He remembered the fear, the hope, the strength in her eyes. He realized that she had not only changed his life, but the lives of countless others. The center became a symbol of hope in the city, a place where children who had nothing found everything. Safe place, caring adults, education, and a chance to build a future. It inspired others to start similar programs, creating a ripple effect of kindness. John and Rosa continued to work side by side. Their partnership was built on respect, trust, and a shared vision for a better world. They knew the road ahead would have challenges, but together, they were ready. John's story became an example that true leadership is not about power, but about service. Rosa's story was a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness can change the world. And in the heart of the city, in a place once filled with loneliness and fear, a community of hope and love thrived because a millionaire CEO had followed an old cleaning lady after work, and what he discovered changed everything. If you want, I can help create summaries or expansions for other stories too.